This video for Hatshepsut follows on directly from the video where we looked at Hatshepsut's images, particularly in the statuary. In this one we're going to have a look at the way historians have interpreted that, and we might even see some changes over time and some debates, and that's really important to be able to understand these, to be able to articulate them back in a response. So we're going to start with one historian, Barry Kemp, and he argues, and it's a very sound argument, that Hatshepsut referred to herself as male and depicted herself as male because there was really no feminine alternative if she wanted to be depicted as a king. The conventions of kingship demanded that this is the way you're presented, so therefore if she wanted to be regarded as a king, that's what she had to do. He goes on to say that the pharaonic regalia, particularly in those offering scenes where the king is communicating with the god, is just the way that people expected to see it. It was the expectation, and therefore Hatshepsut had to sort of do that, otherwise she wouldn't be regarded as a king. He also argues, which I think most historians now agree, that she dressed as a female in her normal life. It was really only in these scenes where she was depicting herself for a purpose, in statues or in reliefs where she was depicting herself as male. It's unlikely she did that in normal life. This is Roland Tefnin, and he wrote a book particularly on Hatshepsut statues called Le Statuaire de Hatshepsut. He's a Frenchman, and he argued that those images gradually became more masculine over time, and over time her images became far more masculine in appearance, and also she adopted far more pharaonic regalia. So if we remember back to our previous video, the argument would be that pink granite statue where she's only wearing the Nemes headdress was earlier in her career, whereas that colossal striding statue, which is far more masculine and has adopted the full pharaonic regalia, would be far later in her career. And he argues that that change over time happened gradually as she became more comfortable with the way she depicted herself as a male king. There is a flaw to his argument, and that flaw is that the statues can't be dated, so we don't know when they were constructed. So it's very difficult to argue that one was before another when we really can't put them in any kind of chronological order, without any kind of logical chronological order where we're happy with the dates of those of the construction of those statues. So his argument is flawed in that regard. Pamela Bradley, she highlights the fact that there's been a bit of confusion around in text, even within text. So one text might start with referring to Hatshepsut with a feminine pronoun by using her, and then later it will say him, and there's some confusion there regarding that, and perhaps it may have even confused the scribes who were doing the work. The divine birth scenes is a good example of that, where she's depicted as a male in many of those scenes, but actually uses the feminine pronouns in some of those scenes. That might have been causing some confusion for those temple scribes, or she might have had a hand to play in how she was depicted too. One thing that Pamela Bradley notices, which is really important, is that the military texts that we have with Hatshepsut generally are more masculine. However, she does avoid the bull reference in her Horus name, which Thutmose II and Thutmose III both adopted. They had a reference to the bull in their Horus names, whereas she avoided that completely in her Horus name, which is part of that fivefold titulary. Kathleen A. Keller, she says that she's not trying to pretend to be male, and we see that particularly in the fact that, and this is a good point, that almost all, if not all, of the images we have of Hatshepsut have some indication that she wasn't male. So she wasn't trying to hide it. So this is a good point to make, to be able to argue that she wasn't trying to hide the fact that she was male from the people. It was very obvious, it was clear, and she was embracing that in all of her images in some regard, but the expectation was that a king would wear what a king would wear. Joyce Tildesley also offers that argument that she's not trying to pretend to be male. She depicted herself both as female and male because that's the way tradition demanded it. So very much in the same line as Barry Kemp and Keller and those others as well. Alan Gardner is much earlier, and he says that she depicted herself as both masculine and feminine because she was hesitant. She was a bit too hesitant to depict herself as fully male or fully female, so he argues that she was depicting herself as more and more male because she was a usurper. She'd stolen the throne from Thutmose III and was trying to justify her rule. But remember, he was writing in a much earlier time period, which has influenced the way he's interpreted this situation. We've also got Peter Dorman. He is following that most historians now are saying that she's not pretending to be male. Got a good little quote here from Dorman. Experimentation with iconography was prompted by the necessity of effective rule. So to rule effectively, she had to be regarded as a king. To be regarded as a king, she had to depict herself as a king, and that sometimes she experimented with that. That's what he's really saying there, but that's a good little quote to learn. And finally, Gay Robbins said that Hatshepsut needed to play the male gender role to be recognised as a king by her subjects. So the king was depicted in a certain way. There was only one way to do that, and that was through a male gender role, and Hatshepsut fulfilled that to be able to be represented as a king. So there's some historians' views. There are more, and there are more in our notes that we'll look at in class, but there's a bit of an overview, and it is good to be able to see how they changed over time and understand who agrees with one another as well.